Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Internal Use Only podcast. My name is Dan Sullivan, your host. Today's interview features Brian Margolis. He is the owner of PG Wholesaling. He's been on the show several times. You might be part of his LinkedIn groups or seen his content in the past. He joins the episode today to highlight his new white paper called the Wholesaler Roadmap to the Top. This is a framework that he's developed that outlines how wholesalers can take their game to the next level. If you'd like to find the full white paper and the video, you can access that on his website, pgwholesaling.com. A couple of notes before we get to today's interview. A big thanks to everyone that's followed us on LinkedIn, Instagram, and subscribed to the newsletter. If you haven't done that, make sure to go follow us, find the page on LinkedIn, Instagram, and sign up for our newsletter. That's the best way to stay up to date with everything going on at Internal Use Only, including episode updates, more wholesaler content, and partnership discounts. Speaking of partnership discounts, I want to say thank you to Noble for partnering with Internal Use Only to deliver both the newsletter and today's episode. Noble has several wholesaler-approved items for our busy lives. Their new public rec collection has men's tops and bottoms that's got you covered for your commute, to the meeting, or to the course. You can support Internal Use Only by shopping with my link below. It'll be included in the show notes. Use Welcome30 for 30% off your first order. I've had a little bit of travel lately. I have been rocking their Game Changer pants. They're perfect for flights, trains, or longer drives that'll keep you comfortable, flexible, but still looking polished and professional when you get into your actual meetings. So thank you again to Noble, and thank you all who have subscribed to the newsletter and followed us on LinkedIn and Instagram. Without further ado, let's get to today's episode with Brian Margolis. I'm joined again with Brian Margolis. Brian, this is what seems to be an annual occurrence for us to get on the horn and talk some wholesaling. We're here to talk about your newly published white paper, which is the Wholesaler Roadmap to the Top. So this is effectively a framework that you've observed and that you've put together that lays out the foundational building blocks for wholesalers to reach the top of their game. I'm not going to necessarily say they have to be the top of their company's trade run, but this is what you've seen that really gets someone to go from more of a stagnant, similar type of production to that next tier, however it's defined by the company, the team, and the wholesaler. Is that correct?
Yeah. And there's actually two versions of it. I have one for managers and trainers and one for the wholesalers themselves. But what it was born out of, I'm thinking last year, it was actually 24 into 25. I was working with a coach personally, and this was actually something he thought I should do. He after all these years of doing this, I have my pillar system and all that. That's the actionable stuff. But he felt like I didn't have a big picture framework of how my stuff all fits together, and so this was always there. I just had to kind of put it down in writing, right? Put it in video and in diagram, and so. Yeah, I decided as I was going through it to turn it into a short white paper. And that way, if you're a manager or a trainer, I think if you look at these 5 levels of wholesaler development as they move toward the top of their game of what they can produce, it gives you an idea for your training curriculum, for the resources you bring in, where these fit, right? And I think for an individual wholesaler, it kind of gives them a good idea of maybe what's missing in their business. Because we have wholesalers that might be, focused on level 3 or 4, but their level 1 is really weak. And so, that's kind of how I just thought a white paper would be the way to do it, which then turned into a video. And I have both versions now.
Awesome. Yeah, well, for sure. As always, with our guests within the podcast, we'll link those in the show notes. We'll make them available. But let's have a conversation about some of these pillars. So do we want to go through each tier one by one? You want me to walk through
the levels, not the pillars.
Levels,
sorry.
yes.
Gotcha.
Not to be confused. You know what? My brain's all confused because similar to you, I just put together some pillars of modern internals that was born out of a similar conversation where someone had said, hey, man, you've been interviewing these people for like 5 years about this role and where it's going. What's the framework? And I was like, well, I've got the framework. I just haven't put it into a visual yet. Okay. So these are the levels then. So in order, I mean, this is the most important, right? Strategy and process, creating value, getting more meetings, selling more per meeting, and then leverage. So if we just start out at the beginning, because I know this is, we've talked about this on the podcast. There's 3 historical podcasts of you and I talking about the strategy and process. Maybe just give an ear to the audience Start us off with what you're seeing out
Yeah.
there and why that's so relevant.
So strategy and process is level one. It's also the foundation of everything. And it's having a strategy and process. And I'll define strategy in this case as this is for when we say strategy and process, strategy is the wholesaler determining each week where to focus their skills, their talent, their work ethic to get the biggest ROI, right? In my world, we call that identifying your pillars, your weekly pillars. That's the strategy, right? I have, so much time, so much mental energy. What should I specifically be focused on for the biggest ROI? Process would be how you execute that strategy, meaning, great, these are the 6 things. I know if I knock them out by Friday, like I get in my world, the pillars, everything's good. How do I do that with all this stuff coming at me, right? Meetings, the company just emailed me their 400th priority of the month that we have to focus on this and, just all this stuff coming at you. How do you structure your week, your days? What rules do you operate by, which I think is important for people to have internal operating rules. And so that's kind of strategy and process. And the reason that's level one is because without changing anything else, which I don't recommend, but if you don't change anything else, you don't get any better at anything. If that's all you did was run a more intentional business, a more focused business, that alone to me would help your business, would get you to that next level. Um, then the one that throws people a little bit, because I put it as the second level, is creating value, right? Because everyone always thinks that it should be getting meetings, right? Right? Like getting meetings. And the reason I have creating value, meaning using the strategies and tactics to actually become more valuable to advisors, is to me, that is the gasoline for the car that is getting more meetings and selling more per meeting. Meaning, it's really hard these days to get meetings if what you're offering isn't actually valuable. And so in the creating value section, what I do is in the creating value section, I talk about strategies and tactics to actually be valuable to advisors. That way, when you move into level three, getting meetings, right? Getting more meetings. Now we have the short game of getting meetings in there. We have the short game of how do I get meetings yesterday. But the long game, the kind of business you build where as every month goes by, it's easier and easier to get meetings, that has a lot to do with how valuable you actually are to advisors. And then it'll come back in play in level four as well.
I want to carve out a little bit of time to talk about
Yeah.
the creating value. Anyone that follows you they'll hear a little bit about the blue apron strategy, and they'll hear a lot about how you package things, which is the value in and of itself. In the
Yeah.
white paper, as you detailed it, if this is essentially a lot of reflections from a client of yours whose name is Chris, and whether it's his real name or an alias, I'm not sure. But one thing that stood out to me as I read this was what Chris perceived to be his value add resources. What is the alpha versus beta of value add resources to the average wholesaler and asset manager today?
For all my clients, it wasn't that I recommend they don't offer those things. It's just on the continuum of what is valuable to, something that's not valuable at all to the most valuable thing in the world. Those things, just because of regular supply and demand, right? Those things that are now everywhere, the million offers to, quarterly outlooks in their inbox, and, 30 wholesalers willing to pull out their credit card, and, everyone and their mother's got a software to review your book, or a team, or we want to do an annuity review, or whatever it is. From the advisor's perspective, because they're everywhere, right? They're not that valuable. Okay. In terms of if you do them, the kind of reciprocity that is felt. So I'm not saying those things don't have value, but as far as what we want to do, build reciprocity, they're on the lower end of that continuum. Then I also mentioned something else that's on the lower end of the continuum that I think is a little more surprising, which is the practice management information, right? All the things on, whether they have internal consultants or pieces or modules or a retirement institute or whatever it is. And again, those have their place, and maybe that's a different discussion because I do want my clients to use those. But the information in the format it's in the hour-long webinars, in the million modules, in the whatever, I don't think that is as valuable anymore. And so what we talk about in that section, the Blue Apron process, is basically taking that non-product information and weaponizing it, right? Giving them the tip of the spear so they can just stick it in the oven and get a result. When you do that for the advisor with that information, that's what's valuable to the advisor, right? It doesn't look great on a main stage, it does, whatever, but that's what we want. Like, show me, don't tell me. And I can just tell you from a lot of repetition here, thousands and thousands of coaching sessions, advisors find that stuff way more valuable when you just kind of, here's how to get the result, go get it. And whether that takes you 5 minutes or whatever, that's pretty darn valuable these days. Here's the other thing about that I love is with the Blue Apron process, and we talked about this in detail in a previous episode, but it allows someone who maybe doesn't have the confidence, maybe they're on the desk or freshly off the desk or they're young, they're not claiming they're the expert, right? They don't feel that intimidation factor. They're simply sharing something with the advisor that the advisor can see clearly this was valuable, right?
Do you have some good examples of that, especially for maybe the younger audience that's tuning in, where they applied some of this and really saw good results from it?
Yeah, so one of the things I teach in general, internals, externals, doesn't matter, is one of the things I teach to them, and then I'll show you how we made it of our strategy, is I teach direct response copywriting, how to write emails that, advisors will actually respond to, right? And there's some tactics, some basic tactics, the way you change your email format, what you do in that email. It's very simple for anyone who's learned that from me or learned it from someone else to now take that information and share it with an advisor. Now, maybe not do a full training like I do and write emails with them in real time, but literally just say, if you make these 3 changes to your emails today, you will get a higher response rate. And anyone who watches my video or listens to me or whatever can write down those 3 things, share them with an advisor, and see, that advisor will start getting a higher response rate just by changing how they write it. They don't have to be a direct response copywriting expert, whatever. So I have a lot of clients who that's all they do, is that's one of their VAR strategies. They just change what they call it. It's how to write emails, clients and prospects respond to, right? Instead of advisors respond to. But they can show them those quick little changes in 5 minutes. And that rolls right into 3, which is the get more meetings.
I want to talk a little bit about this because there's the two timelines that we talk about, which is the short game and the long game. And
Yeah.
in the short game, as detailed here within your white paper, you talk about 3 ways that this particular wholesaler immediately saw more meetings. And those were direct mail, quick hit calls, and then great events. And direct mail, I feel like that
Snail
has to
mail.
be snail mail. That has to be the most I would say, tapped avenue right now for
It is.
salespeople, just given the clogged nature of inboxes and digital communications. But that's probably fair, right?
That's exactly what it is. It's a blue ocean strategy, right? For those who don't know what I'm talking about, you can Google the book, but it basically says, you know, don't feed where the sharks feed in the red ocean, right? Go where there's no competition. And if you send something in the post, right? Let's do our English version. If you send something in the post, if you send something in the mail and you handwrite an envelope, or it's a package, or it's a FedEx, or it's a box, or whatever, they're going to see it. I promise you they're going to see it, whether it's valuable or not, but they're going to see it because there's way less competition in the mailbox. And so we've done a lot of really cool experiments with snail mail to get meetings. And again, I don't even think we've scratched the surface. I'm in a mastermind. We have a session later today with one of the best, with Stu Heineck, who wrote How to Get a Meeting with Anyone. And all we talk about in this group is different ways to get meetings, different snail mail, different whatever. I mean, we haven't even scratched the surface in the world of wholesaling. And so snail mail to me is it's a great differentiator.
Can you offer us any successes, maybe recently converted a meeting, what they included in the mail, like how long it took, cost, all that? I'd imagine it's really not much different than just 15 minutes of careful thought and time crafting and mailing, right?
Yeah. So one of the recent experiments we did was, again, because I'm working with Stu, who does cartoons, but a lot of my clients, we can do cartoons and things, doesn't have to
I'm
be
reading his
snooze
book right
cartoons.
now, by the way, How to Get a
Oh,
Meeting
all
with
right,
Elon.
okay.
Yeah. I'm like
So
30% through, I think.
we did an experiment with a group of my wholesalers that we got the data on, and it was I'm a my former scientist brain. I like to do different experiments, this thing and this version, whatever. And just anecdotally, we did great. Some people did better than others. But I have a guy who's been wholesaling for probably 20 something years in Florida, and with an 8.5 and 11 personalized cartoon that we stuck in a FedEx envelope with a typed out note in a brown craft envelope, and then we cut out a little window in the front of the FedEx so you could see the cartoon through it. He got a meeting. He got a bunch of meetings, but he got one with a $3 billion team and a $6 billion team that he couldn't crack any other way. And yet this 8.5 and 11, personalized cartoon, it had their name in the caption, whatever, that did it.
Awesome. I love that. So
Yeah.
great events here. I know you've advocated for this for a while. So how are how are people that you're working with rethinking what kind of programming they're putting on for advisors?
The way you do a great event is very simple. You use the empathy standard. And the empathy standard is real simple. If you're going to ask someone to come join you for an hour and a half or 2 hours, and you got to include travel time, right, in the middle of the afternoon or in the evening or whatever you're asking them for, even if it's an hour Zoom or whatever it is, if you were in their position, if this was your business day and someone who was trying to sell you something, because that's what you are, okay? They're like, don't kid yourself. That's what they know you are. That's what you are. If you wouldn't go to the event, if you wouldn't take 2 hours out of your day, why would they? And when that's your framework of creating events, you go, oh, no surprise, nobody wants. It's not a full room because I brought a PM to Maggiano's, or it's you just start. You have that empathy standard. Then the next step is real simple, but again, it requires you to redefine what work is as a wholesaler. That's when you just get creative. There's no shortage of event ideas out on this internet thing, whether it's Chat GPT or Googling or whatever it is. I had a lady just for fun. She doesn't know anything about our industry. I hired her, paid her like $25 an hour, gave her a limit, I think of like a couple of hours, and she came up with like 80 event ideas. And we just put them up on our next level wholesaler like membership site. And I'm like, just a little, that extra 10% can mean everything of creating the kind of event that someone actually wants to go to. Be a little creative.
So we're in the Northeast. We're coming up on the spring season, so golf is now becoming back into the mix. And
Right.
I was shooting the shit with one of my friends, and I was saying, like, if I was planning something, and I assumed the demographic would be okay with like golf, I
Mm-hmm.
would what I want to do is go to like a range practice area, and I would want to target advisors, and it would basically be like portfolio and swing tips. I would message it differently, but you'd effectively have to have a financial professional give some advice and then bring in a head pro to do like quick lessons. Do it like an hour and a half, get people out there, mix and mingle. That would be a different event than just like golf, because we've talked
Yeah.
about golf itself. 4.5 hours is a huge waste of time unless it's your biggest client in the world.
Yeah, and there's all sorts of ideas around that. Having do a putting contest, having them bring their kids for a putting contest. And I mean, there's no shortage of if you literally just went on Chat GPT and said, I want my clients to come to a driving range. I want to make it better. What are some special ideas I can do? What are some things could I bring out of food? What could I do that made it special, different, unique, whatever? You'd come up with a billion different ideas, right? You come up with a billion, and I don't consider myself a creative person, but I know how to go find creative ideas, if that makes sense. And
Yes,
that's all
yes.
I'm asking them to do.
So that's a good wrap on the getting more meetings or running
The
better
short
meetings
game. Yeah,
in the
that's
short
the
game.
short
If
game.
we
Then the long game, don't forget.
Yes, and I think that a lot of that ties into having a presence, being valuable enough that people are finding you, filling out your schedule. The other element of this too, though, is all about within the meeting time, selling more per meeting. What makes an effective meeting? There's so much out there, I think, just on the implementation part and knowing where you stand with an advisor and being assertive in what that looks like. But I did want to ask about this again. We'll reference this client. You mentioned that as one of the upskilling opportunities or just where he was trying to improve. was
Yeah.
on storytelling and persuasion. Can you offer us some insights into what that particular skill set looked like in the context of selling more per meeting and being effective in meetings?
Yeah. So we'll take a step back. You get to the, because I want to kind of set up where this is coming from, right? Because I think when I do, more people will be willing to invest the time that are listening. You do the work, you have the short game, you do the long game, you become more valuable to advisors, you offer valuable things, you write emails they respond to. Getting meetings is less and less of a problem. You have more relationships, whatever it is. The danger then is to get into the friend zone, right? The danger then is to be getting into the friend zone and to think a full calendar is the only thing that matters. And so the three things about selling more per meeting, and let's go deep on the one you want to, it's basically number one, building reciprocity by being valuable, getting them to proactively want to do business with you. The second one is clarifying conversations, which I think most wholesalers struggle in that. But I think the one you're referring to is then part three is effective messaging, right? Really learning persuasion and how to tell a story and all that kind of stuff. That to me is ninja level stuff because what most, and I don't want to say wholesalers because I'm guilty of it, we're all guilty of it. We often confuse being comfortable with being effective. And so what a lot of wholesalers think is, well, I know my product story, I can tell it in my sleep, I know how to answer every question they have, I know the common objections. That just means you're comfortable. Doesn't mean you're effective. And so I encourage wholesalers, and I have a couple of example books and things like that, and people, but I encourage them to actually learn some of the basics of effective messaging, of actually telling stories that people remember, of asking questions in a certain way to get to the truth, right? One of my new favorites, Dan, is, and it's people like to ask me, how do you use AI? And you'd think it'd be this very sophisticated answer. I think one of the best ways to use AI right now is to literally go into ChatGPT or whatever one you use, either upload your product or explain your product and say, hey, can you explain the benefits of this product to me like I'm a fifth grader? And I want you to use analogies. You can try things like forest animals or sports or race cars, but tell me an analogy so a fifth grader would understand the benefits of this product. And when you work on it that way and you're able to tell the story, you'll know you have a great story, like an analogy, whatever, for your product when they're like shaking their head before you're even finished because they see where you're going. Not only does that help you with them, but remember, they have to turn around and sometimes and talk to their client about it, right?
You hit the nail on the head with that. You have to be reminded that you can get pretty technical or serious, but then advisors or whoever else you're dealing with is either relaying that back to an end client, which in that case, hell yeah, you're going to need to have something that's super simple and more familiar. Or if it's a more institutional investor, maybe it's a board of directors or an investment committee, but it's like
It still has to be easy.
it still has to be easy, right? And they have to think about it enough to articulate it because that's where sales get lost is when you're outside the room and that person needs to go implement it.
I'm a big fan of the sell more per meeting stuff because I think there's a lot of wholesalers who, for a lot of years, got away with it, but now you can't just be a relationship manager. You cannot just be in the friend zone. You've got to actually sell in those meetings.
Let's close on this here with just the leverage angle.
Leverage is fifth, it's the fifth level. There are leverage tactics that are already in the other levels. Like, for example, a quick hit calls leverage, right? The ability to, in a short amount of time from a distance, tell your story or give your value or whatever you're trying to do from a distance, one to many, right? So I would consider that leverage, right? We're talking about that. So leverage is all throughout. On level five, what I'm talking about, like the top of the wholesaler mountain, is when you are absolutely like it's no longer good enough to do something because you might get a positive result out of it. Like you're trying to put up the kind of numbers where every hour has to be worth it, right? And so the idea of, driving to someone's office to say hi to them and give them a product update and deepen the relationship, like that's no longer acceptable anymore. And so to move big numbers, it's more of a focus on leverage. Like I have to intentionally make sure I'm doing more of my meetings from a distance that can be done from a distance. I can do things like quick hit calls. I can use my internal correctly, not just, oh, I don't care what they do as long as when I need that thing, they get it for me. Like actually using your internal, like really thinking like the people who run a business, right? Really thinking like the people who run a business. And so that's what I mean by leverage, right? More and a lot of fishing versus hunting, like really making yourself attractive to advisors and things like that. And so that's why it's the fifth level. I can tell you this, the best wholesalers that I work with, their days and weeks are actually slower and less hectic than the kind of meaty middle who's just trying to drive more hours, go faster, do more, send more emails, all that kind of stuff. They have a
Yeah.
very kind of very intentional, very leveraged, and when they're focused on something, they do it. They do it great.
You list out a few of those examples of leverage in the white paper as well. So we covered a lot of them. The one that I wanted to ask more, or one that stood out to me, was effective outsourcing. When you think of effective outsourcing, what does that in practice look like for some of the top performing wholesalers or those that are getting to the
Yeah.
top level here?
Okay. So let's talk about ways you can outsource, right? The ones you mentioned, you can outsource inside of your company. You can delegate and train internals to do certain things, to be a duplication of you, to do certain things that they're more optimized for that you shouldn't be doing. There's also a lot of resources inside of companies that I think a lot of wholesalers don't even know they have. And they want, like, especially with data and building whatever, to using some of those kind of internal data, propeller head kind of people, and really figuring out what they can offer. But I think what you're getting at is, but I'm not a business owner with this big budget where I can go hire people, right?
Yeah, like outside of the
Yeah.
office, outside
So
of
here's
the those with the
so
same
here
email domain as you, what's being
yeah.
outsourced?
Well, let me give you a couple of examples. One great way to outsource, okay, is let's just talk about VAR strategy for a second. The end result of a VAR strategy is very simple and very powerful, and that's why the advisors like it. But it can take a little time to create those VAR strategies, even if you use the resources that I give and the methods I train. So, one of the best ways to come up with VAR strategies is to steal them, right? Like people who are in my program, a lot of them use the same VAR strategies. They steal them from me, they steal them from each other. Outsourcing goes like this: I'm going to find three wholesalers or two other wholesalers in or outside of my company. A lot of times outside of my company, right? Who think like me, who whatever, and we're going to commit. I'm building a VAR strategy. The three of you are building a VAR strategy. We're giving ourselves, 5 weeks. And in 5 weeks, all of us are coming together, and now we're all going to have four VAR strategies instead of one. That's outsourcing. Another thing, and again, a lot of times wholesalers won't ask. It's ask your company, am I allowed to use my budget to do? And the worst they can say is no. But wow mailers is something that I teach. Those packages we do. We've talked about those in past episodes. We're still getting a 50% meeting rate. There are companies that I tell people about, admin kind of support marketing companies, that they'll do a lot of the more tedious parts of that as a service, and they know, these companies know what a wow mailer is, they know what it is. And so and I will say 75 to 80% of my clients who want to use that company or those companies, their companies eventually say yes, you can use those. A few cannot, and that's, I understand that. But again, if you don't ask, and so to me it's like, if I'm using my budget to get someone to do wow mailers getting me a 50% meeting rate, that's outsourcing to me, right?
Yeah.
That's
Oh, yeah.
outsourcing
That's
to me.
exactly what I was envisioning. Yeah, because
Yeah.
yeah, maybe it was the organizations that I had worked for. It seemed like it was either piece together what's available internally, but I think using other vendors just became a headache because
For some, yeah, and in some
someone
companies, but
internally would
again,
complain about it, or you ask your internal to do it. But I'm glad that people are now using effective outside resources to achieve their sales goals.
a lot of wholesalers will say things like, well, my manager said, like, that's a pain, just do it this, whatever. And I'll be honest, the really good wholesalers don't take no for an answer, right? When they're talking to compliance or they're talking to their managers and they're going, okay, but I really think this is effective. What is a compliant way I can do this? Like ask compliance to be on your side. And it's usually honestly not a compliance issue.
For everyone, again, just as a reminder, take a look at the Next Level Wholesaler program. So whether you're looking just to streamline your processes, just become more valuable to advisors, or just get to that next level, reach out to Brian regarding how he can help you get there. And as we wrap this up, Brian, you and I were just kind of talking about some thoughts and ideas, and we were musing that potentially, maybe, most definitely, there are a set of wholesaler biases that exist out there. Maybe it's inherited from past generations. Maybe it's old school thoughts that are still viewed as rules of thumb, but maybe they're just bygones. So you put some thought into this. I know I put some thought into this. Can you share with the audience what are some of the things that you've observed that are maybe old
Yeah.
habits or biases that just don't apply anymore?
Yeah, we need another hour. No, yeah, what this was born out of, I started writing a piece about it and I honestly got lazy. So now I just have like this chicken scratch here of all these assumptions that aren't, in my opinion, not true anymore, but wholesalers and distribution teams still work off of. Let me get my reading glasses here. And sometimes I can't even read my own chicken scratch, but I'll highlight a couple of them. I got a lot here and I know we're coming up on time, but one of them is this idea that three times the effort gives three times the results. And what I mean by that is a lot of times wholesalers have to get, their company's like, oh, we're doing this webinar. I need you to get people on the webinar, right? Or a PM's coming to town and you still have openings in your calendar. I need you to get more. And the assumption is that if the wholesaler has sent a couple of emails out about the webinar and talked to some people, and the internal sent some out, and they only have like three people attending the webinar, this idea that if they do two or three times as much more stuff, emails, blasts, whatever, that somehow that three is going to become a six, going to become a nine, and it's just not true. It's the law of diminishing returns. It's the same thing when they're trying to fill their calendar, with these PMs that a lot of people honestly don't want to talk to one on one sometimes, just out of the blue. And this idea that, I always tell them, like, you spend X effort and you get a certain amount of meetings for the PM. But if you spend 4X the effort, you still might not get any more meetings for that PM at that point, right? You've kind of gotten the ones who you'll get. So I think that's, this idea that if you talk more about something, you'll sell more. That curve works in a lot of ways, right? That's an assumption. Um, I think the other assumption that drives me nuts is that the reason it's hard to get meetings anymore is because their inboxes are full and they're all zoomed out. And to me, again, if something's actually valuable, it doesn't matter if they have a full inbox. It doesn't matter if they're zoomed out, right? And the joke I always use is if you emailed them that your best friend just sold his company and netted $11 million and he's looking for an advisor to help him invest it, will you meet with my friend? They'll answer your email. Now,
Guarantee that email will get responded
yeah,
to.
you don't have a line of friends like that. I get it, but the point is, it's they're not responding because what you're offering isn't worth 30 minutes of their time. And I'll give one more assumption here. I got like 13 of them written down here, but
Well, free preview. Sorry,
yeah,
free
maybe
preview for our friends of internal use only here.
the idea that to build a great relationship with an advisor, to sell a lot, to work with an advisor, that you have to meet them in person all the time, that you have to break bread, that you have to have, it's just nonsense in 2026. Now, again, I'm not saying in-person meetings don't have an effectiveness to them and all that stuff and whatever, but the idea that that is the only way to do it and that is the best way to do it, that all your meetings should be in person and whatever, I actually think it holds for most wholesalers. There's some exceptions. I actually think the ones who are in the field, and this will probably cost me a lot of gigs at certain firms, I'm sure, but the idea that their wholesalers need to be doing all in-person meetings like Monday through Friday or whatever is actually holding them back from selling more. It's holding, just when you simply do the math of how many times you'd have to meet with someone in person and the inability to do good follow-up Zooms and things like that. It just doesn't hold. It does not hold.
Yeah. And I sometimes have a difficult time articulating this because I would need more industry stats and facts. But like think about your own personal life and the amount of times that you can achieve whatever you need to achieve in person versus virtual. And then apply that to your role as a wholesaler. It's not like that's different. There's so many people that prefer a quick get together over a video that achieves the exact same thing as getting coffee or physically traveling. So yes, you have to balance the cost. You have to be aware of the personalities. Maybe some people do like virtual versus in person. So
No doubt.
you'll never get rid of that. But I fully agree with you. Like if you are assuming that it's more effective to have a full week of in-person meetings, it's unfair to think that that is more impactful than balancing in person with virtual meetings.
You show me somebody that's in the field 4 or 5 days a week consistently, week in and week out, all day, morning till night, and I'll show you someone that isn't that valuable, that their clarifying conversations stink, that are spending a lot of time with people that it goes nowhere, but they're optimizing for a full calendar. And so I think you need the hybrid. I think you need a good mix of both. There's a time and place for both. And nobody, if they were running their own business and were paying this out of their own pocket, would recommend that someone else do it this way.
Your comment a moment ago about the effectiveness of bringing a PM or someone in, I feel like we should workshop like a ratio of like meeting value and time and dollars advisors bring relative to how many meetings they've had in the last 3 months to sort out the effectiveness of how wholesalers are handling meetings and what they're doing within each meeting.
Let me, I know we're getting close on time, but this is so worth it. I want to be clear about something because I don't want to be contrarian just to be contrarian. I believe that when you have a PM or an outside resource, whatever, they are a tool and they should be brought in, especially for certain kinds of trades and clients and big advisors. There's a time and place to bring them in and close the deal or move it along or whatever. And I know some companies have data where they say, like, well, we've shown that, the connection between when someone meets with PMs and when they buy and all that stuff. And my answer to that is, yeah, correlation and causation, meaning people who want to learn more about a product or are interested tend to be open to meeting with that PM. So there's kind of bias built into it. It's when you're forcing people to meet with PMs because they're the wholesaler just they have to look good and they're literally. I mean, I talk to these wholesalers every day. They're just calling in favors with their friend. They're like, "Dude, I have this PM traveling with me, or I have this person, and I don't have that many meetings set up, and blah blah blah, and whatever. So will you just do?" And that's not what the companies want. That's not what the wholesalers want. Nobody wants that, right? Nobody wants that. And so I think PM should be used like a tool, but I don't, the forcing of it holds wholesalers. I've seen wholesalers freak out and they're like, I haven't done anything the last 2 days. All I've been trying to do is this PM's traveling with me or this person's traveling with me. All I'm trying to do is get meetings for this thing that's happening in 2 weeks. And that's how they're spending 2 days of their time,
Yeah, and
right?
if you were to
That's
take
the
a step back and almost reframe it in the context of everything that you and I have discussed so far in this conversation, it could be more productive or impactful if that portfolio manager on that trip saw the one person who was going to do the most business in the next 3 months. And that is viewed as a massive success compared to it being a failure because there's only one person that's there and it's not 10 people on the calendar.
Yes. If I'm running the company, I want advisors meeting with my PM or my specialist or whatever it is because they want to meet with them, not because wholesalers are calling in favors. And the fact that that's not communicated between wholesalers and managers, I get it. Like people are protecting their jobs. I really do get that, but it's an assumption. It's a problem. So
All right. Well, we could
I'll
fully
say I'll
run
save
down
the
the
other 48 for another
yeah.
time.
Yeah. And if you're listening and you have any other ones, I'm sure the field wholesalers, external or internal, that have listened to us this far, first and foremost, thank you for spending time with us wherever you are in the country or traveling in the gym. Think of some and send them our way. Either send them to Brian or send them to me in the podcast. We will add them to our list because we'll officially start documenting I would say, the biases that just no longer apply in the modern wholesaling world.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks for having me again, Dan.
Thank you.